Hey, Chuck, I, I will turn it over to you, Chuck.
Give me the screen.
You want the screen?
Oh, yes. That's all I need.
Share screen.
Excellent. Okay, here we go. There we are. So I hope we're all seeing one another there.
I've got a good.
And you have me on the big screen.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, more about how ACSH is trying to work AI into its workflow, but I'll give a little background. We can certainly talk about some of the ways it's impacted healthcare. So oddly enough, I've actually been involved with AI issues during my early academic days. My interest was in medical decision making, and AI has its roots, at least in healthcare, in that arena. So AI, when you get to the bottom of the pile, is really a very sophisticated if-then statement, which is the basis for all the algorithms that we see today, even the Google's algorithm. The difficulty with Google's algorithm is that there's 1,400 different ifs that can be combined in various ways to give it a then. So they become quite advanced over time. When I was doing my research and looking at the issues, the primary approach was what they called rule-based systems. And they had talked to experts, and they realized that when experts confronted a medical problem or another problem, they had some kind of internal, intrinsic way of thinking about the problem and breaking it down into easily digestible, decisionable parts, and which is what they thought of as rules. So if the patient had a low blood pressure as the starting condition, the physician might ask what the heart rate was, because if the heart rate wasn't elevated, it would suggest that the blood pressure was due to some kind of neurologic problem rather than a cardiac problem. So there was a large attempt made to develop these rule-based systems, and then there were systems laid on top of that about which order the rules were going to be fired and so on. Really came to very little in terms of fruition. Instead, medical decision making began to look more at the statistical data and to start to do these larger meta-analyses to look at data and kind of aggregate it and make some decisions. The real breakthrough, I think, in AI, when we talk about it now, are neural networks. And other than saying that they attempt to mimic in some way the neurologic structure of the brain, I can't really describe very well the underlying programming behind it. But neural networks have made a huge advances in parallel with our understanding of vision and how the information that comes into our retina is translated into an image. They've made huge advances in medical imaging. The first part of that came from the fact that with the development of CAT scanners and all that, it became necessary to digitize medical images. And with the development of these patient archival systems, there was a huge mass of digital images available for these neural networks to look at and develop their own algorithms behind. So you've seen a lot of the advances, and a lot of the articles you'll see is how this particular AI program or that particular AI program does a better or worse job than a radiologist in looking at a particular image and identifying cancer. The last great threshold, of course, was, now that we have begun to find some ways to conquer images, was a way to conquer words. And the way we conquered words was using the statistics that were associated with the grammar, because grammar provides a structure to how we speak, and therefore it makes itself amenable to statistical analysis. And with that, it brought us to these large language models. And basically, these are statistical relationships that can be built up. They've made use of the internet as their source of information to see what words tend to follow one another. And they can group it. They can say what word tends to follow medial in talking in a medical framework versus what words follow in an anatomic relationship or in a sports relationship. So they have various statistical packages that can do that. And with the advent of more advanced computer machinery where computations are done in parallel rather than in series one after another, these systems have become very powerful. So if you think about these large language models, these statistical patterns can generate sentences, paragraphs, even entire articles given a prompt. I was always wondering why the articles described these as hallucinations when they were just off the track in line. But if you think about these things as large language models interpreting patterns, then the use of hallucinations, which is a visual reference, I think makes a lot more in the way of sense in doing things. But that's the state of the general art at the moment. If you look across medicine, and Henry and I often disagree about the value of AI. A lot of the demonstrations that Henry puts forward as positive are about imaging. They're about a colonoscopy where the AI can identify additional lesions that the practitioner may not have seen. Most of the AI that I wind up talking about is related to decision analysis, and in that area, it doesn't do quite as well. It does almost as well as a human being, but there's a large problem with gaining the context to make those systems difficult to use, especially because they can't easily be transported from one particular health system to an next because the patients in the health system are unique in and of themselves. So the most buzz that you hear about AI in healthcare has to do with administrative functions, being able to find more codes to upcode cases, having voices talk on the telephone to you, chatbots, those kind of things, more than any real significant change in how we deliver medical care. I put this quick PowerPoint together, and I have my little face up here in the middle of it, and that's a change from previously. And I just did it because one, I could talk about the slides while still being on the screen, and two, these kind of advances in technology are not really what we talk about in terms of artificial intelligence. These are just advances in technology that we're able to mash together where they found a way to take my camera feed and port it into PowerPoint. I could now take this PowerPoint discussion that we're having today and using PowerPoint, I can make it into a small video. I can take that video into Substack or Medium, and it will slice and dice it automatically into little things that I can port out onto the social media as teasers if they wanted to see the entire conversation. But that is not what we're doing over at ACSH. And what I thought I'd do with that is just do some of the things that we normally do and see how it goes. So I'm going to pop out of this, and I'm going to bring up something that we do with Henry all the time. So Henry does a lot of radio broadcasts, and Julie, bless her heart, listens to these radio broadcasts, records the broadcasts, and uses recording software to generate a transcript. And so here's the transcript of a typical program that we got where Henry's talking to Lars Larson about transplantation. And what we do in the back end is I want to turn this into a quick summary that I can then use to make into an article without a lot of work or bother. And the way we do that nowadays is with ChatGPT. So this is our current version of ChatGPT. So I'm going to just copy that. And I'm going to give ChatGPT a prompt. So before I punch it out, you can see that the key thing in working with AI is developing the right kind of prompts. And that prompt that I wrote there took me several iterations to come up with what I really wanted it to do. So I wanted to summarize, I wanted to simplify, I wanted to put into a conversational tone. It could do it as bullet points, it can do it as any number of things. And I wanted Henry to be the first person speaker. So with that, we put in that article and hit return. And that's what I get. And that's not really what I wanted. So and you can see in real time that I'm getting something I can work with. I find it still too long. I guess I really shouldn't be showing this to Tom because I get paid by the hour. And there we go. Now I have something that I can work with. Now I won't copy this and paste it in. I can, but that's not usually what we'll do. But I will take some of those lines and use them in developing the text that goes with it. We could do the following. And now I have a title that I can work with. Again, it may not be the one, organs for sale, new plan to solve America's transplant crisis. I can, you can change it around in any way you want. You can see that for creatives, I guess that's the new term for the writers. For writing, this gives you a head start if you can go in and wind up editing that. The other place that in this particular case, again, this is the kind of things that we do all the time is so SEO keywords are search optimization words. And this is how when a Google search, if those keywords are in there, this is how these articles move to the top of the queue. So keywords have been for a long time important in Google's algorithm. So again, I'm really bad at identifying the keywords, but ChatGPT offers me a whole lot of ones to choose from. And we've been using them more of on a routine basis in what we've been writing. The other place is, I'm going to close that because we're not going to. This comes from a study that's coming out this week that I'm writing about. You will not see this in this particularly same form. These are the results of a study that looked at the risk calculator being used by the American Heart Association for the assessment of the 10-year risk for cardiovascular disease. And the big change in that risk calculator is that they dropped the use of race as a variable because it was racist. Okay. And in its place, they substituted zip code. But if you know anything about zip codes and the census data, I can get your race just as easily from your zip code. So I'm not quite sure what they gained by it, but they did by putting themselves one step farther away from a biologic understanding of cardiovascular risk, they opened up their calculator such that about 4 million people that are on statins now no longer need to be taking them. And, you know, I'll wind up talking about the article and those flaws. But that
Chuck?
yeah.
Okay.
So taking all that, I just took all the data. I just copied it right out of the article. And it breaks out the findings. Now, again, we're not taking this at its word. I actually read the article. I actually know the findings of the study. But this gives me a way to structure what it is we're writing and make it, it's certainly what you see here is certainly easier to manage than what you see here. So that's one of the ways that we're using it fairly frequently. Let me pop up into this and pull up a different example. So this is another AI. It's a Google AI. It's based on their Gemini system. And this is more the kind of AI that would be used if we're doing work with a long-term research project or something more in line with some of the things that Henry writes. And again, I just took that statin change piece, and what I did is I loaded that into the system, and it offers me some questions, as you can see over here. For making use of this, but I can ask it questions. So you would think that that's not very much different than the chat GPT that I showed you, but this one is a bit different. And I'm going to move you guys over here for a moment. You can see that it's done a summary for me, but these markings here take me directly to the article. This is more of a reference system. This gets around a lot of those problems of it hallucinating and not knowing things. So if I'm working with 5 or 6 sources and I ask it a question, it'll look across all the sources and it'll reference me back to every place that it got information in the summary provides me. So for somebody that's working on a complex topic, this is a very good way to keep track of what you're doing. And when you're writing, you can pull quotes, you can annotate it, so that there's no question that when we're talking about things, we can go right back to the primary source. So that too seems to be another way. So here's the statin use recommendations. And again, you can see that it'll reference me back right into the article and show me where those statements are. So if I can go back and compare what they wrote to what was actually said, I can pull quotes. It makes it very easy to put together an article on a complex topic. Last but not least, I don't want to kill you here, is, I think it's here. Let's see what it is. Let me move you guys over again one more time. Going to go back to this model here. So back into the chat GPT. Josh has been very interested in generating images for things. And from, we wind up using free sources of images and to avoid problems with copyright and to provide large payments for license materials. But sometimes you just can't find what you want. ChatGPT has a amazing ability to create images. So here's one I just did yesterday just because I wanted to play. And you can see my prompts working my way down the page. So I asked it to just generate an image of a scientist, give it more of a Van Gogh look, you know. And you can see how malleable these are. And so this, to me, was the final image of what I was looking for. But it does not take these systems very long.
How did it know what background to give your scientist?
Because I tell it. Background, say up here,
You specified?
here's the image of the side with the background style 1830s. I
Okay.
asked it for that.
I see.
So now I'm asking for a contemporary. So it'll take a little bit longer to generate an image, but it will.
Scary.
Yes. Scary. And these systems, there you go. So very much a similar kind of guy. And we did the same thing. I was interested in a house on fire, and I wanted to put one woman crying up at the top, but that didn't quite work out the way I wanted. So I took out the firefighters and put some houses around it and changed it to a contemporary house.
Wow.
And now these images I can then use on the web, with no copyright liability. So that's kind of how I'm going to stop our screen sharing and go back. That's what the writers had been up to. I've been the most technologically interested has been me, so I've led the charge. Josh is coming along now. When he saw the images, Josh has gotten hooked on it. He's already started putting one or two images in there. Henry's a little slower to get there, but we're making progress in that way. But the big advantage of this is that it allows us to relatively painlessly multiply our work effort without additional labor, because it's tough to get labor in this market.
But on the images, is there not the problem of a futz factor?
Of a
Futz factor.
futz?
Futz. It's a term used when all these different fonts and bolding and highlighting and underlining came into the word processing system. And so a lot of people that are writing things spend more time trying to decide which font they want to use and what cases they want to use, and
Well,
that sort of thing.
for the text-based material, you copy and paste it into our workflow and it comes in as whatever font you're working in. So for the text stuff, it doesn't make a difference.
Right. I'm saying for the images, though.
The images, I have not found the images to be as useful as Josh. I think every one of us has found something that we like about it that we can cleave upon and use. I haven't been able to master the prompts in imaging the way I've been able to master the prompts in text, because I use this thing every day to make things go a little bit easier. So it's easier because it's a faster time frame to play with different prompts in imaging. I think, if I spent more time doing the imaging, I would find it to be equally facile because you can put things in and out. You're right that there's a lot of things in some of these word cloud things. There are fake words, they're just letters that are put in there, or that's not all in English, and you can tell it put it all in English and it doesn't do it. So there's still AI still hallucinates. It's a tool, and I just, with all the hype around AI, I thought it was worth showing you what was actually getting done by us on the back end, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that. Now, one of the downsides that nobody has really addressed is the fact that the statistical data that these large language models use comes from the internet. And that over time, as more and more people start cutting and pasting AI onto the net, then it's going to become very self-referring, and it's going to lose a lot of its ability because it's just going to be using what it wrote as the evidence for what should be written. And that's a problem that nobody seems to really want to address. But in a tech savvy world where it's act fast, break things, and apologize later, no surprise that this, among many of the other problems with AI, are not being looked at.
But it is taking on a human trait because it's becoming self-serving.
Well, I suppose that's true. So that's the deal. Got some questions, answers?
So which are the main search engines are you using? It's going to be ChatGPT and Gemini, or how about some of the others?
Those are the two.
Mayo has one.
The Mayo Clinic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have, I've not had the opportunity to use any of these more specialized medical AIs. It'd be interesting to see what they come up with. And again, it's so amazing to see the large academic centers, which have been involved with this for a long time, are really jumping in with both feet. It'd be interesting to me to see how they're going to use it on the clinical side. The administrative side, the people that bought are the administrators. And in the same way they came up with the electronic health record so they could do billing, they're going to find ways to drop their administrative costs.
Sure.
But how it's going to play on the medical side, it's still not clear. I think that in the end, there's always going to be a human interposed between the AI and the patient at some level, at least on the clinical care. And I've written about this a lot, any number of times. When it comes to the litigation, which will follow, and it will be there, it will be the doctors that take in the fall on this one. It will never be.
As the statement goes, you have to curate everything that comes out of there to make sure it's not a hallucination, right?
You do. You have to absolutely do that. And when you think about it in the health systems that you guys are in, who's the who oversees how the AI is ported into the system? Who keeps the evidence intact? So here you have this big risk factor calculator from the American Heart Association that's now changed. So you have to make a decision. Do we want to change it to the new one? And if we do want to change it, how do we port that in? What happens to all the old patients before? These are all problems. And the electronic health record, when it appears on the doctor's screen, it appears to be a cohesive document. But in fact, it's data and memory from any number of systems. The images all come from PACS. All the laboratory data comes from the laboratory system. The text comes off of another system. So that record only aggregates for a moment in time. So now that I'm suing you, and it's It's 2024, but we don't come to court until 2028. What medical record are we going to pull up to show the decisions that I made? And are they going to keep a copy of that? Are they keeping a copy of the old model so that I can use that in my defense? You know, any number of medical issues that have yet to be dug out that have been there since the electronic health record. I mean, most of these issues about, you know, legacy and maintenance and who's the decider have been there all along. Nobody wants to do that. And then what is the role of these big software companies when there's a problem? Who fixes the problem? Don't get me started.
Does AI have the ability to make healthcare less expensive?
Well, you're not talking about my salary now.
No.
Okay. I just wanted to clear up that it wasn't, you weren't going to be interfering with the incomes of anybody.
But my dad was a biomedical engineer and created a lot of diagnostic equipment. That equipment saved lives, and it cut some costs. The CAT scanner gave doctors the ability to look inside the brain to see what was there without having to do exploratory surgery first. So one of the surgical procedures was cut out, but it costs a lot of money to run somebody through a CAT scanner. So there's costs that are added, but there's costs that are reduced as well.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to play out. The AI that's being quickly embraced is on the administrative side. When you go on to the patient portal now, there's an AI program that will be happy to address your questions and answer 90% of your questions, or ultimately will serve as the moat before you get to talk to a human being. That's there. So they will have labor saving, administrative cost savings right away. But it's very difficult when you talk about clinical medicine to always show that you're going to have some savings. So you look at something like the Epic's sepsis algorithm, which is an AI-driven thing, and they've looked at all the people in particular, like the Mayo health system, and identified the markers for these people developing sepsis, or these people that are going to become unstable and require a transition to a higher level of care. That seems like a reasonable thing to do, and you can if you can identify it prospectively and you notify the doctor, that can work out. And the data that they presented, which I've talked about sometimes on the website, is that they can identify people that are going to transition from the floor into the intensive care unit, meaning they got suddenly more sick and they needed attention. They absolutely can identify those people, but it's unclear whether that's saving anybody any money, because there's any number of false alarms that require the doctor's attention. And these are people that in general are going to be going to the ICU anyway. And what we've done is we've reduced their stay by a day or two, and we've reduced their mortality in some cases. And that's all to the good, but I don't know how you weigh that in a dollar and cents thing and see if there's a saving. You know, when you talk about length of stay and everybody gets all hung up in that, but for a Medicare patient, you can stay in the hospital for the next 2 years. It doesn't make a difference to Medicare. There's a set fee that the hospital's getting for that care. The hospital cares how long you're there, but Medicare doesn't. You know, it won't change. You know, if you can get everybody out of the hospital 24 hours sooner from the total HIP, that will not change the cost of Medicare by one nickel. It will represent a savings to the hospital because they can have more turnover or something else. And so it's their advantage.
Well, it will next year when Medicare pays less for the HIP on the basis of this year's data.
Yes. Oh, but but luckily enough, even our orthopedic colleagues are smarter than Medicare and have moved all of this stuff into the outpatient setting, where they can keep not only the surgical fee, but the facility fee, which is the real money.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's at a very simplistic level. I have only one experience with AI, and I may or may not relate that. But let me just take you back to using AI for ACSH. Your job is to distinguish valid from invalid information. When you use AI, I understand that you're going into a body of knowledge that has been put there by someone.
Another one.
And there's a lot of junk science out there, and the people who amass all that information may not be as sophisticated as you are at distinguishing it. So now you ask AI to write something for you. How are you, other than by your own clinical background and experience, going to distinguish the sentences that are valid from the sentences that are pure junk?
So there's an important distinction I probably should have made earlier. I'm not asking AI to write something for me. I already have the text. I'm not asking it to go to the universal world of the internet and ask Dr. Google what we should be saying here.
Okay.
So in the examples both the examples I gave you are material that we already have that we know. I know that that's the transcript of the conversation that Henry had. I know because I pulled the data. That's the data from the paper. And what I'm asking the AI to do is to summarize it or simplify it. So having read it, and then I'm using it as a way to edit, to create, and I go back to edit. I think you're right. When you go to the new Dr. Google that will be doing this, you are going to get a wide range of misinformation built in. And if you are not sophisticated enough to separate that, it will definitely lead to more problems. You already see the articles starting to bubble up about this. Tom is a big advocate of pointing out that DuckDuckGo is a much more conservative friendly search engine in Google, which it is. There's no doubt when you look across the results that in fact is the case. And now we're beginning to see that using ChatGPT will surface some very odd things across the net. And then people are jumping on board to say it's biased this way or biased that way. I tend to think of it as it's a very good mirror. It's a statistical analysis. So it's a mirror of whatever happens to be on the net at that point in time. So that volume probably plays a bigger role than veracity.
Mhm.
So if there's a lot of stuff out there from the anti-vaxxers, that's going to bubble up statistically. And these systems don't know what they're talking about. They can put words together in ways that we like, but then you're going to get more anti-vax stuff just because they're punching out more and more and more of it than some other group. I think that may be the best way to think of it. Because it's statistical, it's volume, not veracity.
I'll tell quickly, my sole experience with AI was asking a historical question, and I asked a question that I knew the answer to. I was prompted to do this by a colleague of mine, friend and colleague, who's a pulmonary internist, and he had gone on ChatGPT. He knows a lot about surfactant at the surface of the lung. He did a lot of research. He asked a discerning question, and he was astounded by the sophistication of the answer that he got back. By the way, he asked for the bibliography, and he got a bunch of junk. He did not get a valid bibliography. That's a separate question. I thought of something that I knew a lot about. I know more about the McKinley assassination and why McKinley died than most everybody because I wrote a book. And I wrote the book based on a modern interpretation of the medical data, which is available. But the historiography says that he died of an infection. He did not die of an infection. He died of a gross fluid imbalance and cardiac failure. So I asked the question, how did McKinley die? And I got back a very well written with lots of historical context, but the bottom line was that he died of infection. So then I established a dialogue and I said, but there were no bacteria reported in his autopsy. The ChatGPT constantly agreed with me as I asked these questions, but then parroted back something that was only based on the historical information that somebody had put in. And it was obviously obvious that my book was not one of their sources.
Right, because it wasn't, that didn't get multiplied through the system. When you talk about, they talk about the Turing test to determine whether there's intelligence in the computing system. And what they're asking is, the Turing test basically says that are the responses that you're getting human?
Yeah.
Which means, do they sound human? And the early ones were doing very much like what ChatGPT was doing when you were asking it questions that didn't have a great answer to. It would agree, it would reflect, it would do those early kind of things that we saw with AI 25, 30 years ago. But with large language models, it could create very plausible sounding human sentences, because what it's doing is like a baby, is it's mimicking what we
And
write.
in this case, it was a dialogue too.
Yes. In the same way that you can have a great conversation with a 4-year-old up to a certain point, that's what's going on. And so it in some senses, it passes the Turing test because it sounds just like the person you're talking to, unless you actually know what's going on, at which point its hallucinations become clear. It's going to be, it's going to have a major, I think it's going to be a major impact on society over the next several years. Whether it's good or bad is past my pay grade.
Is the use of hallucination your
No.
input, or is that commonplace now?
That has been a very common descriptor of when the AI lies.
Okay.
Or tells a mistruth. And as I tried to say at the beginning, that's weird. It's just lying. It's just making up this. And there's an article that I talked about this week where it says that it's not hallucinating, it's not lying, it's just bullshitting.
As the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. So
yes,
that means the source of the data is ever more critical.
Yes, and that, to take it back to the medical world, I was talking to my friend, was a big researcher at Sloan, and he's now at Cornell Weill. And the idea that we can use the EHR to develop a great evidence base, it has to give you pause when you see all the people that are cutting and pasting from the previous visit and putting it in, or God forbid you're a patient and you go into, I cannot tell you the number of times my blood pressure has been taken with a sweater on me. That's not valid. It's not going to be good for anything. But we're just loading it into the system, and there's just no thought yet about the quality.
Does AI have the ability to say, I do not know?
Good question. Let's ask it. Let's ask it. I'm gonna.
A lot of people don't have that ability, but
I certainly don't. Often wrong, never in doubt. I'm taking the screen back. I assume I have the screen back. Good.
you do.
Do? Okay.
What a
So,
wonderful question.
but you see that That can be built in. That's a nice reflective state.
It is.
But you see from what Jack says is that when confronted, it will be agreeable without admitting.
Your generation of images was impressive. And by the way, there is a AI image story in today's news. Maybe you saw it. The latest trick among the adolescents, at least adolescent boys, is to take the face of a friend in school and attach it to someone else's nude body and then distribute it widely. Another source of adolescent trauma.
Yes, we're going to see for the election a real amping up of the capabilities of AI, because much like pornography has led to all the major developments on the internet over the last 30 years, the political campaigns are going to be huge. It is going to become increasingly difficult to tell the difference between what is real and what is not. One of the audio systems that I'm looking at to just do some audio versions of our work will take a 2-hour sample of your voice and clone it so that you can give it the text and it will read it in your voice. And that's commercially available. That doesn't even have anything to do with the systems that are not commercially available. They can take the voice and completely clone it, let alone take the face and clone it.
Chuck, this is already happening. Well, watch CNN. They've got a clip of Biden that has been created by the Trump campaign, and it shows him wandering aimlessly in a field, and yet then they show where his movement came from, and he was at the G7 or whatever this last meeting was, going back and forth, shaking the hands of paratroopers.
So that's not even AI. That I can do.
AI?
I can do that in Photoshop now because it just it's you can do it on your phone. This magic eraser where you can erase an image and it's replaced by generative content. That's been there forever and a day.
I see.
We're talking about a situation where they can have either one of the candidates walking in, sitting down, and spouting whatever they want them to say.
I see.
It's amazingly sophisticated as to what can be done on the information side. New age.
New world. Yeah.
Scary.
And the other one I'll just to share, because I've been trying to find the right way to write about it, are the automation of weapons for war, because of course, there's nothing like war to advance technology. We have a 1,000-year history that war advances all of our technologies along the way. It's been very good. Vietnam brought us the trauma system in the United States out of Maryland, so it's not all bad. But they now have both China and the U.S. have these 4-legged robots that look like dogs that are now battle ready. And the U.S. has, they've attached a flamethrower to the dog. So run through the field and burn things up. They have a little drone that's about 3 inches in size that they can put plastic explosives on, tell them who it wants, tell them who to go kill. And it flies at 150 miles an hour to do it. Wow. So you can release 30 or 40 of these drones, 150 of these drones into the room. You ain't going to get them all. Skynet.
Yes.
And on that happy note.
Anyone have any more questions?
I was going to say, how'd you say so calm and happy, Doug?
I meditate. In fact, that's another just an odd thing to share is that the vagus nerve seems to be getting more and more attention. I know you guys are in a different part of medicine than me, but the vagus nerve is just kind of there. I'm trying to keep my hand off of it. And my old textbooks have 8 or 9 different ways to cut the vagus nerve as part of a gastrectomy.
Yeah.
They didn't do a gastrectomy anymore, but it's
My father had his cut and it worked very well.
a super selective vagotomy.
I don't know, but this
I,
was.
I always laughed. All those chapters on ulcer disease that are in surgery are gone. They're completely useless. We were able to turn them into bariatric surgery, so there was a savings there. But it turns out that the vagus nerve does a lot of things. There's an article out this week that I'm going to take a look at and see whether we put up on the website, talking about how the vagus nerve is involved in controlling inflammation and sending messages from the gut to the brain. So this, for me, this is where East and Western medicine are finally going to start to come together. In
Do
these
you
places.
feel any guilt over all the vagus nerves you cut before they discovered Heliobacter?
Well, I'm happy to report that as a resident, I didn't get to touch no vagus nerve. So I'm fine. I can feel guilt about the number of limbs that I lost during my career. I can go with that, but no, vagus nerve, I have no guilt over.
I have to
Well,
say,
as a resident in a VA hospital, I cut a lot of vagus nerves unnecessarily.
well, my father had 50 years of pain-free eating and stomach after his vagus. That's well, he had half his stomach cut out as well. I've had nearly 50 years since I was treated for helicobacteria.
Without, yeah,
Yeah, without ulcers.
and that's the change in medicine. We're getting to be, I feel bad as a surgeon because I see that my days are numbered in many areas. That there's always either a pill or hopefully a minimally invasive procedure, something I can still do, that's been replacing things. The change in surgery just in my lifetime has just been amazing.
There'll always be bed sores, though, for
Thank you. How
to take care of.
spoken like a plastic surgeon.
Right.
Anyone have anything else?
No,
Okay, well, thank you all for participating. I appreciate it.
Thanks very
Thank you
much,
for your
Chuck.
support as
Okay,
well.
thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck.
Very interesting.
Okay, thank you. So you know what's going on at work, and I'm sorry, Tom, I lied about all of that. I spend most of my day just crafting sentences.
Okay, Chuck, thanks.